Okay, hello everyone and a very warm welcome to our webinar. This webinar is talking about from team and publishing sites to enterprise collaboration. My name is Chris Casingena and with me is Patrick Püntener, and today we're going to be talking to you about the essentials of team and publishing sites in SharePoint, as well as Patrick's session on Matchpoint Snow. Now, just a few little bits of housekeeping to start off with. This webinar runs for an hour, so if you're on Greenwich Mean Time, it runs from 2 p.m. till 3 p.m. We will be taking questions at the end of the session. Please use the chat window to ask any questions that you have, or line your questions up in the chat window for us to address later. Also, this presentation is brought to you at a screen resolution of 1024 by 768. This is the most appropriate resolution for a webinar so that this screen fits nicely on your monitors. This can sometimes cramp some of the content in SharePoint. We just ask that you recognize that, and obviously SharePoint looks nicer on a bigger screen, but we're just trying to make the presentation as acceptable as possible. So, again, thank you very much for attending. So that's just the overlay for the session at the moment. I'd like to introduce myself and my co-host just before we actually start the session. So my name is Chris Casingena and I'm a SharePoint trainer for Combined Knowledge. Traditionally, I've been training for about 3 years, focusing on SharePoint end-user training, as well as other products that revolve around SharePoint, such as the Nintex products. I've also spoken at some of the conferences based in the UK, like the International SharePoint Conference and SharePoint's Evolution Conference. And I'm also involved with developing Combined Knowledge's Support Plus product, which is a just-in-time support tool that's to support SharePoint and other Microsoft products. I'm just going to pass the audio over to my co-host Patrick Püntener, who's going to introduce himself as well.
Yes, hello everybody, also from my side. Hope you can hear me well. My name is Patrick Püntener. I am the sales director for Colygon. Colygon is a Swiss-based ISV specializing in developing high-performance tools for SharePoint. Our major product is Matchpoint. And the second product is Matchpoint Snow, which I present you in a while. And I'm also regularly speaking at conferences and in webinars.
Thank you very much for that, Patrick. So the agenda for this session is going to mainly revolve around the following slide. So the webinar agenda consists of myself discussing with you some of the essentials of SharePoint. So we're going to talk about practical benefits for using things like team sites. There's a lot of undertones to that particular area that quite a few people don't consider. So we're just going to sort of talk about some of the features of team sites and why they really do benefit a business. We're also going to talk about the power of a publishing site, sometimes lesser understood, what features can really benefit which situations in SharePoint. I'm going to pass over to Patrick, who's going to introduce Matchpoint Snow for enterprise collaboration. So midway through this session, I'm going to hand over to Patrick, and Patrick is going to continue the webinar for us. At the end of that, we'll be taking Q&A based on either of our content, and we'll answer as much as we can during the webinar, and we'll stay in the chat after for a little bit longer just to wrap up any additional questions that come in. Okay, so I'd like to start off with the benefits of using a team site, and there's a few demonstrations that I'm going to throw into this section as well. So team sites are basically a structured area to focus on a team's need by adding relevant apps to house essential content which a team works on. Because most teams' requirements differ greatly from each other, for example, an IT department's needs differ very heavily from a sales department, having your own team site in a modular format can ensure that you can add and remove components as a team evolves. So as a SharePoint site evolves with a team, it still becomes relevant. So team sites are very quick to set up, and they have a very simple interface to just configure a quick name and description and URL of your site. And once created, SharePoint 2013's Getting Started web part, which normally features on the home page, will give you essential links for branding it, setting up your security, and adding quick apps. So there are benefits to using a team site straight away, keeping content relevant. If I go into SharePoint, you'll notice that I've currently got a team site at the moment based on annual production. It's a very busy site at the moment, but I might want an additional team site. Some departments, for example IT, might be split into 3 general areas, such as a help desk, a server support team and a development team. These team sites are perfect for making business appropriate sites that are focused at teams. If I was interested in creating a new site and I had site owner permissions in a SharePoint site, it's very quick for me to go into the Site Contents menu in SharePoint and choose to create a new subsite. They're very quick to set up, and I can just say, for example, support team, description, annual production support materials. URL should always be nice and short, so I'm going to put in support, and I'm going to use this team site here. I'm also going to use some unique permissions because it may be that I want to change the security to be more applicable to my environment. When creating the site, I'm just going to keep some standard security groups just to house my visitors, my owners, and also my members. So I'm going to just have new groups for all 3. I'm just going to populate them later on. And the other benefit of a team site is keeping it relevant. You'll notice that I've got a document library, but I don't have a tasks list. Well, it'd be nice to have a tasks list, so I can choose the option to add additional apps, or I could quickly click on this link to create a task list immediately. But look at the wealth of apps or lists and libraries that you've got available to quickly put content holders into your site. If I wanted to store some tasks that are relevant to my team, I just put in the information, team tasks, and there we go. So if you know what you're doing and you've had the relevant SharePoint training to understand what you're doing in this scenario, you can very quickly put together your team sites. Once your sites are up and running, you've also got other benefits as well. Some of the benefits go as simply as you don't have to check in content, you don't have to have approval on content like you would in a publishing site. It's less formal and it means a team can get things achieved, items achieved a lot quicker. Team sites also adopt Wiki Pages introduced in SharePoint 2010, which are very fast to edit. So if I wanted to quickly update my home page, there's no word of a lie, but that actually is very quick to do. Someone says, well, you should have a picture on your home page or a little bit of information. I click on the Page tab, select Edit, and I don't have to have any HTML skills to do this. I can simply sort of insert my mouse cursor, put in some rows of text, and then once I'm done, I click on Save. So it doesn't really require you to know much more than how to use something like Microsoft Word. It's just like a text editor. There are some obvious nuances which are a little bit more related to web pages, but the whole point was it's quick and easy for a team to work with. The benefits of the team site also go twofold. You've got news feeds that can provide fast and informal ways for team members to communicate each other, and follow-up tasks which can be added to any post. The example that I'm going to show you in a moment is that creating follow-up tasks to posts in a newsfeed means that you can actually accumulate your important tasks like follow-up tasks from posts, workflow tasks and tasks that are created in lists, and then you can view those all from your profile. So this is something that was introduced in SharePoint 2013. And rather than use this particular site, I'm just going to go back to another site and show you this demonstration. So I'm going to go to my annual production site. And a little bit further down on the page, away from all of their pets and so forth, we might have some information. So how is it looking at Manchester is a question that's posed to Alex, and Manchester being one of our new sites. What's nice is that if I want to follow this up, I've got the option under this ellipsis to follow this post up as a task. This means that I don't have to forget about important things. I click follow up, and as a team member, I can keep track of my colleagues' posts, but also I've created a follow-up task, so I don't forget to reply. So if I go to my About Me page, as well as updating your profile, you may have noticed just here that there's a task section. If I go into that, there's the follow-up task that I've just created for myself, as well as a follow-up task that I established yesterday, and also tasks that are coming from a task list. Cumulatively, as a team member, I can work on all of the tasks from all of my team sites within a single location. Again, another big benefit for collaboration in a team site. Other benefits of using a team site. So here's a quick heads up for permissions. So in SharePoint 2013, the members of your site have heightened permissions, and this allows them to work with apps. So using security to its full effect, team members can essentially section off different areas of their SharePoint site from the public. For example, if you have a document library which houses important information or incomplete reports or something that's very important but a department doesn't want other people to see, a team site owner can then choose locations in SharePoint such as apps and then change the security. So just to show you a quick example of that, I'm going to go into SharePoint briefly. So in a team site, we may have different areas of SharePoint, our SharePoint team site that we want to section off. So if I go into our support team site, we might have this document library, for example, here. In a document library, up in the ribbon, we've got the option to change permissions. We've also got that same option in library settings, and we can also change permissions for this document library as well. Normally when you create a site, it inherits its permissions from the parent. However, we can choose to stop inheriting those permissions and define different security. So I'm going to stop inheriting permissions and click on OK. Then I can choose to maybe exclude our visitors from this document library. This means that very simply in a team site, we've got areas of our site just for our team and areas of our site for visitors as well, by altering the security by changing the inheritance. One last thing that I pointed out just at the beginning of this slide was that the security in SharePoint 2013 is different to that in 2010. In SharePoint 2010, members of a team site had the permission level contribute. Contribute means you can add, edit and delete content in a list or a library. In SharePoint 2013, the standard permission level for a member group in SharePoint 2013 team sites, and that's only team sites, is edit. Edit is a permission level that allows people to add, edit and delete apps. This can help users take a little bit of responsibility off the team site owner by adding and managing their own apps, as well as external apps as well, which are provided on the Microsoft App Store. So just be aware of that. Security is slightly heightened in a SharePoint 2013 team site, but the other SharePoint 2013 site templates are not representing that permission level. They still are set at contribute. Okay, let's go back to our sites. And the next thing I'm going to talk about are publishing sites. So we've seen some really good scenarios for why you might want to work with a team site in SharePoint. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the power of publishing sites. So I think publishing sites are a little bit more autonomous in the business, and often they're used as something like a business intranet which staff visit from the business to see news, communications, events, and essentially an intranet is also used to navigate to other essential areas of SharePoint and web-hosted areas of the business. Now, another common scenario for SharePoint users using publishing sites is basically you can use it as an externally facing internet site so that the public outside your company's domain can see your business's activities. So why use publishing sites as a preferred choice for such an important role in SharePoint as an intranet or an internet site? Well, there's quite a few case scenarios that really do separate something like a publishing site from a team site. So firstly, keeping content consistent is easily achieved in publishing sites through a variety of page templates. As you can see on my slide, I've got two separate SharePoint pages talking about two different subjects, but the layout and format is the same. So this design keeps articles, product outlines, lots of different SharePoint pages the same as each other. It also creates a professional and, more importantly, a reliable experience for site visitors, which is so easily is easily created as a bit of a problem when using Wiki Pages in a team site. As you saw earlier, when I was editing the Wiki page in the team site, I could quickly type into it, but the problem is if my colleague did that, it's not really the same consistency. So publishing sites help to keep your pages consistent. Also, keeping a watchful eye over the content in your publishing pages is very important as well. So it's very easy to make mistakes or for published content to become outdated. So with publishing sites, approval can be set in place to allow a stakeholder to review pages before they go live. In my SharePoint environment, I'm going into my colleague's SharePoint news site. So if I go to something like a page that I've been working on a little bit earlier, so I'll go to our pages library, and I've been working on a new page. It's just called a store homepage, and it's just got some information that I want to present. Now, if I was to edit this page, you'll notice that I've been working on it. Now I want to publish it. So when I choose to publish this page, I'll say something like, I have updated this page. Now I click on continue. The next option available is, if I go back to that particular library, is we will have the option to approve or reject the page. Now you can create a security group of approvers who have the level of access to approve a page once it's ready. So I place a little tick next to my page, and I might have already published the page, but the option to approve and reject is also available when you come to approve a publishing page. If the options are grayed out, sometimes you might not have the approval role to allow you to approve and reject, which means that you can have a specific security group to allow people to approve and reject content. When you're approving and rejecting, when you reject, you can actually put the comments and place those back to the original person who's going through to approve the pages. So that means that someone can even check the pages as they're going live. Now, one other feature to be aware of is that sometimes scheduling tools can really help you with a go live or an end date on specific pages. This can automate an entire process and even set up review intervals to keep your pages up to date. Now this feature is normally switched off by default. I recommend switching it on. For example, going back into SharePoint, we could do one of three things with these pages. We can schedule go live dates, end dates if your page needs to be brought down at a specific point, and review intervals as well. Now if you want to switch a feature like that on, you just go into the library tab for your pages library in your publishing site and click on library settings. Within this section, you need to ensure versioning is switched on in the form of content approval. Notice content approval is switched on already. With content approval switched on, you can then go into Manage Items Scheduling. Manage Items Scheduling has been enabled for this library, but I would recommend you switch it on as well. This gives you additional benefits for managing your page. So if I go back to my pages library, and go back to my store homepage. Just going to quickly edit the page. And at the top, under the Publish tab, you'll get a new button called Schedule. The scheduling options give you the option to choose a start date. If your page is to go live in the future, you simply enter the date there. If your page has an end date, you can choose the actual end date for the page and also to notify the page author X amount of days prior to that closure. Also, if you want to keep content up to date and you're worried about people forgetting about pages they've authored, you simply set up a review interval, and you can say send content review email request to the author every 30 days, for example. It means they'll get an email notification to let them know that this page has been 30 days without review and just to check the content on it. Again, a fantastic feature of a publishing page to keep content up to date and automate go live and end dates, but you need to switch that option on in the library settings in your pages library. Also introduced to SharePoint 2013 is renditions. So with your intranet site or your externally facing internet site having such heavy activity, sometimes we're concerned about the duration which a page takes to load. I'm sure you've been in a situation where you're thinking, come on, load, I want this page to show me the content, but it's taking too long. So the resolution for this is to minimize large images. So with image renditions, large pictures are reduced down to 4 cropped versions varying in different sizes to suit your page. These sizes help keep the file size at a minimum, which also minimizes page load time. Also, these renditions can be customized so that you can choose the focal points. If I return back to my page again, I might want to add a quick picture. So I'm currently editing this page. I go to the page itself, let's find some space, here's some space here, and I'm going to go to Insert, and I'm going to choose a picture from my computer. And I'm just going to go into my downloads, and let's just pick a random picture. So I'm just going to upload this picture taken when I was in the US, and I'm just going to check that in. Now notice that the picture is quite large and quite high quality. It might take a long time to load. At the top left of the screen, we've got Pick Rendition. I can manually choose one of these renditions, or I can choose to edit them. When editing the renditions, I can choose the focal point of the picture. Notice that this is slightly off center and these are slightly unfocused, but I can click to change that very quickly and just say, yeah, this is the area that I want to focus on, and click Save. So I've just updated the 100 by 100 pixel picture. Once ready, I'll just scroll to the bottom and click on OK. And then I'll finally choose the correct rendition for this photo. So we'll go for 100 by 100, select that as my rendition, and there we go. The other thing is that this keeps things nice and consistent in your environment as well, keeping all of the pictures a similar size. Now you can edit in the site settings the size and even add additional rendition settings if you want to. Renditions also works with videos as well if you're interested. So you can crop and also control video sizes as well. And then one other thing is reusable content. So one last benefit of a publishing site, and this is well worth a mention, is often there is a component of many pages that we use, such as maybe a copyright notice or your company's logo. Rather than copying and pasting this on multiple pages, we can create it once and use that reusable content over and over again on different pages. The advantage of using a single source to replicate that information is that we can actually update all of the references to that copyright at once, rather than having to do them individually from page to page. If I go back to our SharePoint environment, I'm going to show you quickly the copyright. So I'm going to go Insert, Reusable Content and Copyright. As you can see, copyright of Trains by Dave, all rights reserved. That's controlled from a different app. If I go back to Page and click on Save briefly, what I'm going to do is go to the site contents, and then I'm going to go to Reusable Content. And there's the copyright notice there. If I go to edit this item, I can update the copyright notice. Now the advantage here is that I've got automatic updates switched on. If I want to update this to 2014 now, because it is 2014, and save that, what's great about this is that I update it once here, and then if I go back to my other pages, the copyright notice should be evident on there as well. Let me just see if my colleague Rob has used that. Yes, he's got his new product range here, he's used the copyright, but I update it once in a single location and it replicates out to other locations as well. Again, a fantastic feature available in publishing sites, which is not really available in the team sites that we mentioned earlier. So as you can see, although team sites very evidently team focused and make working in team sites efficient, quick, simple and informal, the publishing sites are more autonomous. They're very public facing, and they've got a lot of control to make sure that content is consistent, accurate and maintained. Okay, so as you can see, as I mentioned earlier, there are pros to using both publishing sites and pros to using team sites, and there's a wealth of benefits, and we focused on quite a few there. You may have noticed that I covered quite a lot of those demos at a fair pace. Obviously, as a combined knowledge trainer, if I was to actually teach that out, we'd obviously go through the steps in a lot more detail, but I'm very conscious of the time, and it's pretty much bang on the amount of time that I need to pass over to Patrick. So what I'm going to do is Patrick's going to take over the session now. I'm going to pass control to him, and Patrick's going to introduce Matchpoint Snow, a digital workspace, taking the power of SharePoint and turning it into a location to stay up to date, accomplish work, find people, information and expertise. So if you bear with me for just a moment, I'm just going to pass the presentation role over to Patrick.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So yes, as we have seen before in the collaboration side or team side part, collaboration is a topic that gets more and more attention in companies, and we also believe that it is one of the core competencies that a company should have for the future. In fact, collaboration is probably one of the main reasons why companies exist, because if you don't have to collaborate and can achieve everything alone, why would you bother creating a company? And also Gartner thinks that collaboration is a very important aspect, and also social, of course. And if you then look at SharePoint being a platform able to support you in these aspects, of course, it is very obvious that many companies choose SharePoint to build collaboration platforms and to interact on the social layer. Now, the problem is SharePoint is a good platform for collaboration, but it is not the final solution. So I think if you're imagining a bigger organization, let's say some companies with thousands or at least hundreds of employees, I don't think it will work that everybody gets a SharePoint training and then goes into the site management menu and just starts creating sites for himself and manipulate inside SharePoint, because that would lead to a very hard to manage environment. And I would not be in the role of the IT in such a situation if it comes then to information governance and other important aspects or legal aspects regarding the content in such a platform. So in most cases, there is a lot of conceptual work to do if you want to have a collaboration environment on SharePoint. And of course, also, you need to implement these concepts. Like you need, for example, to think, how do people work? So you need an interaction design, helping people to achieve their goals, because they're not going into SharePoint just for fun. They want to find something, they want to work on information, they want to get some information, and depending on their role, they will do different things in the platform. So you need to have an interaction design that suits them all. That leads us to, for example, different business roles. Different business roles have different permissions. They need different tools. They need maybe different kinds of workspaces to work with their colleagues and so on. So there's quite a lot to do, and usually this takes quite a lot of time. And now, if you compare this to other collaboration solutions, there are few around, also in the cloud, like for example, Jive, or of course also Google has a collaboration offering today, and others. Then in many cases, all this has already been done. And of course, on the other hand, you don't have so many opportunities to configure the platform. You just have to take it or leave it, you could say. Whereas with SharePoint, you have the option to really implement your own solution and also to customize a lot. That's exactly what we did. Our solution, Matchpoint Snow, is focusing on all this concept stuff that you otherwise would need to do in your project. And we have already implemented it. Now, the reason why we did that is that we originally had a product called Matchpoint, which is a framework for building SharePoint solutions. And building SharePoint solutions not by writing custom code, but by configuring. So you could imagine Matchpoint as a collection of components, services, APIs to increase the possibilities to configure entire applications on SharePoint. With this in our bottom, we have created Matchpoint Snow. So Matchpoint Snow is nothing else but a digital workplace solution based on configurable parts. That means it is flexible. You can still change it. You can adapt it to your own specific needs. but it's all already done. And all these concepts that we were talking about before are already in place. We're focusing mainly on 3 areas. One is usability. You hear very often from end users that SharePoint is rather complex to use. Of course, it provides you a lot of functionality, a lot of useful features, but the way it provides it is sometimes a little bit complicated. And sometimes as a normal user, you don't really find the things you need at ease. You have to look for them. And especially if you are a rare user, it is not very intuitive. So we have worked a lot on this. We wanted to create something that is extremely easy to use. You see here, like Facebook. Of course, it's not a Facebook that we've done because that wouldn't make sense in an enterprise. But from the approach, it should be self-explaining like Facebook, because no one is going and taking Facebook courses to learn how to use Facebook, for example. There is also the self-service aspect that we stress a lot, because we think that users should be able to work alone and without constant help from IT. This leads us to the second aspect, which is governance. I mean, if anybody can create a workspace or anybody can create a lot of content, then you should better know what kind of things your users create and do in the platform. Because at the end of the day, you, if you are in the IT, are responsible for the platform plus for the content, of course. So there's a whole governance layer that we have built that allows companies to hook their processes and rules into this layer and manage the whole platform. That's the second aspect. And the third one is, of course, architecture. If you have a nice system that everybody likes, that is well governed, there hopefully will be a lot of use. If there's a lot of use, there will be a lot of content, which means it needs to be scalable. And what you often see in SharePoint projects is they start small, they grow, and all of a sudden you find out you have chosen the wrong architecture. SharePoint would perform just if you had done the right thing from the beginning, which often is not the case because it takes more time, costs more, needs more conception to really choose the right architecture when you start small. So that's also something we have taken care of, because there are best practices from Microsoft how to choose a scalable architecture that also work with small implementations and that can guarantee you that you don't run into a dead end. So our platform is based on such an architecture that grows with your needs. So I have already spoken about interaction design. And before we go into the demo environment to show you the real thing, let's just give you a small example of what work we have put into this aspect. We have modelized the organization. We have taken a generic organization with generic roles and done a persona model that you then can apply to any kind of organization. Because in any organization, you have people just consuming information, you have others creating and consuming, you have third type of people managing things like projects or teams or communities and so on. And each of these personas or roles has specific needs. They have a specific way of working. That also means that they will work in a specific way in SharePoint. And you can model this. You can find out what are their tasks, what are their goals, what are their frustrations, where do they have problems, where can you help them with such a platform. And this can be done by defining the scenarios they actually are working in. So for each of these personas, we have created a series of scenarios by taking care of how do they enter the system, what is their goal, where do they enter it, what do they do in the system, do they administer things like sites or documents or users and so on, do they create stuff, do they publish things, do they maybe just review, or do they just consume information, and how do they exit the system, what do they want to have at the end when they have finished their work. And this gives you a whole list of such user scenarios. And from these user scenarios, you get a clue how to implement the user interface. So this is just an example of a welcome screen. And for example, to find out which information do I need on such a welcome screen. I mean, to provide a welcome screen for a new user is certainly a good idea, but it has to provide the right information. And to find that out, you can look at your user scenarios, you can look at your personas, and then create something that suits the majority of your users. And from there, you go one step further and do a design that fits nicely into SharePoint, that doesn't look too different from what SharePoint already looks like, but that provides more guidance to the user, and that comes in a consistent way, consistent in the meaning of being adapted to what the user does, and not for example, what the administrator will do. Because I think if you go to the administrative side of SharePoint, you have a lot of tools, and administrators are IT people. They have no problem finding themselves within even a large selection of possibilities. But that's not the case for the user, so you have to reduce. So what does this look like in reality? I have just switched to the browser. I hope that worked all right as well. This is the welcome screen we have just seen in the slide. And of course, it is now just leading a new user into different areas of the platform. I will maybe start with my personal page. As you can see, you could also switch the language and influence other settings. So the whole solution is multilingual. Currently, it's available in English, German, and French, but you can very easily translate it into other languages, because the whole interface layer is based on language resource files, which means that everything you see on the screen, all the labels and everything, are completely separated from the application, and you can just export them into an Excel file, send them to a translation service, and re-import the translation, and the whole platform is translated. So this is the personal page. You can see that there is some activities from that person here. You can see a summary of pending tasks, issues, the latest documents, and the workspaces, and so on. There's also some personal information to the left. Where does this person work? And some additional contact information that is coming, for example, like here from Active Directory, but you could also consume that information from an HR system, because our Matchpoint layer provides different connectors for this information. What you see to the right is an action panel, and this is some element that we have introduced that is consistent over all areas. So if I, for example, would like to show more of workspaces that I'm working in, I can click on the Show More button, and I'm switching from the personal profile page to the workspace dimension, which is one of the 4 dimensions that you see here. We have a timeline showing social posts. We have the workspaces showing all the sites. We have a content dimension showing aggregation of all documents, tasks, wiki pages, and what else you have in SharePoint across all the workspaces. And we have a people dimension showing my colleagues and their work. So there's no hierarchy in the whole system. Everything is completely flat, is completely independent of any organizational aspect. That also means it's immune against organizational changes. So you don't have to move your workspaces to other site collections or to other applications if you have a reorg in your company. And it's also very scalable, because every workspace has its own site collection. So you can, for example, use a round-robin database setup to just distribute the workspaces over several databases. You can refine the action panel here. And another element that you also find in all dimensions is the filter navigation. So in the middle, you have always the content, in this case, the workspace with different views. You can just show only my own workspaces where I have a certain role, for example, or those I follow, or those that are corresponding to a trending rule. And then you can go and filter. And for example, I will go just choose the all view because there are more workspaces here. You could, for example, say that you're only interested in project workspaces from a certain unit. So it's very easy to just filter down to a very small number of workspaces, even if you have a large number in the beginning. And this is all based on metadata. The view is all based on search. So it's a search-based aggregation that you see here. That's all in real time, and it's all completely personalized. So physically, you really just have these 4 pages here in SharePoint, and depending on the user, you will see different things. So I could just log out and log in as another user, and I will see my stuff. And this is true regardless of the dimension. It's complete search-based personalization. Now, we have seen an example of how easy it is to create a team space in SharePoint. But still, it required some knowledge of how SharePoint works. With Matchpoint Snow, the user does not require any SharePoint training at all, because what you see here is a complete, a completely simple and SharePoint independent user interface. Of course, it's based on SharePoint elements, but if I, for example, want to create a new workspace, I simply can click on this action here, create a workspace. Then I select the type of workspace I want to create. I just enter a title and a description as before, and I create my workspace. Now this will take a little while because it's a site collection and because we are here on just a virtual machine. But meanwhile, I can tell you some other things. Now I will become the owner of this workspace, and as an owner, I can do things, of course, like inviting other people or govern my workspace or set up a nice picture for my workspace. But I will not necessarily be an administrator on SharePoint level or in the meaning of a SharePoint administrator. That allows companies to give a lot of freedom to normal users without running the risk that they can do things in SharePoint that they must not do. Because the risk is always, if something is really a site admin, that it can do too much. So if I just go into my workspace here, which I can do directly after creation, you see that I have now created a team site that is based on a template. So everything that has been defined for a team site is already here. You have, oh, it's in German, interestingly enough. That's very funny. So I will probably just go into another workspace. That's very funny, very strange. Shouldn't happen. Demo effect. But I have another team site here that's in English. So as you can see, you have the typical SharePoint libraries and lists like documents and wikis and tasks and so on. You also have a timeline that is rendering the social posts. You could also just add a new command and it will appear here. You see the members, and what I mentioned before, I'm now the owner, I'm Stacy, of this workspace. So I can go into view users and just add another colleague or remove someone. So I could, for example, say Jim is not needed here anymore, or he has left my team. I just remove him and Jim won't have any access to this workspace anymore. If I've done a mistake, I can just add Jim again and add him in a certain role. Also here, you can define business roles in the configuration. We have a standard set of 3 roles. And these roles correspond to SharePoint permission groups, which means that a normal user who doesn't know anything about SharePoint permission groups, but knows very well a lot about business roles, has no problems to add the people in the right role. And behind, the permission is already defined in a central way by IT. So this is one example what you can do. Of course, as an owner, I can do additional things. I could, for example, change the logo of my workspace by just uploading a picture I can do that. I can just go into my marketing folder and maybe my Matchpoint Snow folder. There is maybe some pictures for demo environment. I have here one that I want to select. Okay. And the workspace logo has been changed. Or I could choose to govern my workspace and add some interesting information for filtering, for example, which leads me to a governance page. I can edit the topics here. So I could, for example, say my team is located in London. If London is in sight, no, it's not. But for example, in Basel, like this, my team is IT. Is there an IT? No, but there is a facility management, for example, and so on. Or this workspace is concerning a customer, a product, a process, or additional stuff that is relevant to my business. What I specify here can then be used for personalization, because if my colleague from facility management enters tomorrow into the platform, he will see this workspace on the top because the view that I have selected here in the workspaces dimension takes this as a sort criteria. So the view automatically selects the workspaces about my own unit and puts them on the top of the sorting, for example. Then I have other things. I've been talking about governance. So I have, for example, functionality for archiving, for reviewing, for approval that can be managed also by parameters that I can preset in my workspace definition. So for example, I can define for all my team workspaces a review every 3 months is needed to see if the workspace is still in use or not. So the workspace owner could, in that case, for example, get an email, or a workflow could be created to inform the owner. He could then respond, and depending on the response, a decommissioning workflow could start to archive the workflow. Or depending on the parameter here, the workspace could also be deleted or just put on read-only, for example. Then there's other possibilities like content targeting. I could, for example, say like here, my team workspace is interesting for my team, or it's a globally interesting workspace, or just something for a division or a department, and also a confidentiality classification can be made. All these parameters are based on metadata. You can add additional ones. You can say, I don't need a priority metadata, so remove the category, replace it by another one maybe. And so this is completely configurable. Because I can show you how this is done. I just switched the browser so that I'm logged in as an administrator. I'm now in a Chrome browser, so the solution works equally well on Chrome as in Internet Explorer. It also works in Safari and other browsers. So as an administrator, I can press Control-M, and this is opening the Matchpoint configuration environment. So what you can see here is a list of XML files, and these files correspond to what you have seen before. So the whole Snow application is based on XML configurations. For example, the provisioning for creating a new workspace is based on this file here. The workspace is base provisioning that contains a web definition with features, with navigation, with lists, and so on, and permission assignments. And here you see also the roles. You have, for example, the member role that is added, that is linked to the contributor permission assignment from SharePoint, or you have here different parameters that you can modify. You see here that is the basis for this site is a basic team site that is delivered out of the box by SharePoint. And then it's enhanced with all the elements you have seen. So everything that you have seen before is based on such a configuration, which makes the whole setup very flexible and also open for customization. And also creating a new template for a new type of workspace is very easy, because you simply create a new configuration and implement it into the solution, and the users will be able to use it immediately after deployment. So we have a limited time. So the things I wanted to show you are the remaining dimensions. As you can see here, you have the social dimension with the same flexibility to filter, for example, posts by product. You only want to see things about a certain location, or you want to see things about a certain unit. And also you have sliders to filter by creation date and so on. And I think that's quite interesting, because you have the business context in Matchpoint Snow even on the social dimension, which is not necessarily the case if you use SharePoint out of the box. So if you want to see everything that any of your colleagues has said about a certain customer, you just filter by customer and you have it. The same is then available for other kind of content. So you can pre-select here to see documents, tasks, discussions, or other kinds of content, and you have the same possibilities to filter or also combine it with search here. You also have an advanced search page with a normal search field that can be used for searching. And you have, last but not least, the people dimension, where you can filter by things like job title or other information, organizational information. You have callouts about the people, or you can go to the personal profile of someone and see what he is working on. You have seen what Snow looks like now. Of course, it has a number of benefits that you can see here, and it has benefits both for the end user as well as for the IT. And the most important thing maybe is that Snow is free. So the solution itself can be downloaded at our website. You see the link here, and it can be installed. It comes with a user guide, an installation guide, and an installer that is based on an installation script. So all you need is a SharePoint 2013 server where you can install Matchpoint Snow, and you will then get the same environment that you have seen, of course, without content, and just can start working. So I think it's very easy to test drive Snow and see if it's something that you could use in your company. So thank you very much. I hand over or back to Chris.
Thank you very much for that, Patrick. So what I'll do, let's just go back. So we've got about 5 minutes for Q&A. So if you have any questions, at the top of your WebEx browser, you'll see a little chat window. And you can use the chat window as I've done earlier, just put quick messages into there and for Patrick and myself to see. If you have any questions about Matchpoint Snow, or any questions about combined knowledge in our training or products, you can just use this opportunity to use the chat window and ask any questions that you'd like us to answer over microphone. And if you haven't got any questions, that's absolutely fine. We really do hope you've enjoyed the webinar. It's been a fantastic hour. So one other thing to mention is that if you want to re-watch this webinar, keep an eye on the YouTube channels. Patrick was telling me that they've got a YouTube channel. We've also got a YouTube channel at Combined Knowledge, so we'll be distributing this webinar to both channels, hopefully, so that you can find this webinar after it's finished today. So if you've got any questions, do take this opportunity to ask away, and if you haven't, thank you very much for attending. If we don't see any questions popping up, I'll just quickly wrap up the webinar, but if you do have a question, I just urge you to just quickly type it away in the chat window, and we'll answer those questions as they come in. Okay, hi Kevin. So Kevin's just asked, we have multiple site collections to create our new SharePoint 2013 farm. Would you agree that the root site for each should be based on, by default, on a publishing site template? I would be inclined to agree based on the fact that there are quite a lot of features that become available in the site settings features that are reliant upon settings that come in with the publishing infrastructure. For example, things like more advanced navigation options and some other various features are only available if the publishing infrastructure is enabled. So what I tend to do is just that. If I'm creating a site collection, normally the site collection itself is based on the publishing infrastructure, and then the sub-sites beneath that can also be team sites as well. However, it's not essential. You can switch on the publishing infrastructure feature in a team site if that's your top level site. So one thing that we've done in our environment is that we've actually used a team site as a site collection, then switched on the publishing infrastructure afterwards, and that just means that you end up with a more team site focused root site, but then you've also got the features that allow you to do the scheduling, the publishing, approval, and renditions. So thanks so much for that question, Kevin. Hopefully that's answered the question. But if you have any, I know that you've got my contact email address, Kevin. So if you have any additional questions focused around that, do let me know or throw them into the chat window. Hopefully that's answered that question for you. We've got a couple of minutes left. Anyone else, if you've got a question for myself or Patrick regarding SharePoint 2013 on Matchpoint Snow, just take this opportunity to fire a question across to us. Thanks so much, Kevin. Kevin's just said, thank you very much for the webinar. Very interesting. I'm glad to hear you enjoyed it. Okay, it's just coming up to under a minute. So if there aren't any additional questions, I'd just like to take this opportunity from both myself and Patrick to thank you very much for enjoying the webinar. It has been very interesting indeed. And like I said, you can access this webinar from our YouTube channels, hopefully fairly soon after we finish the recording today. So it doesn't look like there's any additional questions, but of course, both at Colygon and at Combined Knowledge, we do have contact addresses on our websites where you can ask our support teams for further information as you require. So I think I'll leave it there. So on behalf of myself and Patrick, I'd like to thank you very much for that. Kadir's just asked a quick question about Matchpoint Snow. Of course, we've got a little bit in that time to include that. Patrick, could you answer Kadir's question for us?
I don't see the question.
Oh, okay. So I do apologise. It should be in the chat window, but Kadir's just asked.
Yeah, it isn't. Not in my chat window, at least.
Oh, okay. I'll read the question. So regarding Matchpoint Snow, is the free download an evaluation version with the full functionality?
Now I see it.
Oh,
it
okay.
took some time. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you for reading it. The free download is a version with full functionality, yes. So you can evaluate everything. Yes, that's true.
Brilliant. Okay. Okay, so I think we'll finish up the webinar there. Thank you very much, Kevin and Kadir, for your questions. I really appreciate that. So we're just 1 minute overdue now. So again, on behalf of myself and Patrick, thank you very much for attending, and keep an eye on our website. We both have upcoming scheduled webinars that you can join on to as well to keep you informed about all of the happenings for both of our companies. So thank you very much for attending.
Thank you from my side as well. Thank you.
Brilliant.